Good afternoon, Oakstone. Good afternoon to all those on the stream. We're so glad you could be here with us. We're missing those who couldn't be with us here today. We know some people are probably going through a little bit of sickness, but it's that time of season. We have all this crazy weather blowing through, so I guess that's to be expected. But we look forward to when you can be back with us. And we just hope then and pray that today's message would be of value as we come to see and understand and appreciate what it is God has done for us. So it's Mother's Day weekend, and in case you didn't know that, consider that the public service announcement. You now know. No excuses, guys. But yeah, when we're looking for a topic on Mother's Day weekend, one such topic could be mothers. When you're searching for topics on a sermon, you're like, what is going on this weekend? Oh, it's Mother's Day. And so that's where I felt like it was being led today, was to talk about mothers in the Bible. And one thing that's really interesting, I think, and maybe you all have noticed this and maybe you haven't, but it's interesting that God reveals himself to us in the Bible as a father. He introduces and reveals Jesus, his humanly incarnation, the way the one he delivered to come and save us. He introduced him to us as a son, right? The Son of God, and then there's the Father and the Son. Notably absent for a God who is so all about the family is the mother. Where's the mother in this equation? And you could probably go and make a sermon just out of the speculation on what's going on there, or maybe there's significance there. But I would suggest that when you're a pre-existing one, when you pre-exist everything, you don't really need a mother. But the rest of us do. The rest of us absolutely have to have one. The rest of us do have them. And so it's one of God's greatest blessings that he has given us mothers. And today I want to spend a little time, I don't want to just like butter up all the moms. I mean, that's great if I can do that a little bit. But I also want to take the time to relate what the aspects we see in Christ are that we can see through motherhood. So whether you are or not a mom, or whether you are not even a female, maybe you're a single young man and you wonder, what am I supposed to get out of this message? Well, the hope is that we can see the aspects of Jesus and his character as demonstrated through the acts and the sacrifices of motherhood. That's really kind of the thesis of today's message. And I hope that as we go through this, we can do two things. We can come out with a greater appreciation for our moms, and we can come out with a much greater appreciation of the things that Jesus has done for us and put into our lives. Now, some of you may say, okay, Justin, that's great. I don't have a good relationship with my mom, or my mom was absent in my life. Granted, yes, maybe that's the case for some of you guys, but we are espousing essentially what is the ideal of motherhood. So God sets forth in his word for fathers, for mothers, for children. He sets forth what is the ideal standard for what moms, dads, children, in all roles of people within a family. He sets forth what it ought to be. Now, nobody ever measures up fully to these things, but they are the goals to which we attain. If we didn't have goals, if we didn't have the stretch goals that God sets for us, well, then we would just sort of have nowhere to aim for, right? And so he sets forth these things, and we have to have that grace towards our parents, mom and dad, whoever it is that raised you, that we can afford them that grace when they fall short, because surely they will fall short in some way, shape, or form. So let that not be the focus as we come in here. Just knowing that if you say, well, this message doesn't really apply to me because I didn't have a great relationship with my mom, well, that's not the point, right? The point is to say, what is it that he has set forth in his word, and how is it that we see, what is it we can strive for, okay? So when someone creates something, back to the kind of the thing about there's God the Father and there's Jesus the Son, but there's really no mother in this equation, right? When you create something, do we have any artists? I know Emily's an artist. Do we have any other artists in here? Maybe artisans, craftsmen. We have a few. Yeah, Hannah, Josh, all the Keeners, pretty much, all the Keener young men. But if you're an artist or craftsman, or really anything, you can be creating dinner, right? if you're going about it in a way that's more artistic in your makings of it rather than utilitarian, I gotta feed my family sort of making of the dinner, right? But anything that you create, anytime any one of us creates something, it becomes or it can become an outward expression of who we are internally. So when I go and build something, what am I trying to accomplish? Do I want to build something with a masculine bent or do I want to build something with a feminine bent? If I'm building something for my wife, I'll probably build something out of wood that has a more intricate nature to it, a little bit less Spartan on the lines. If I was building something for my dad, I would build something that's tailored to more who he is as a man. And I think it's the same with God, really, because the outflow of what it is I'm making still comes from me. I can make something feminine without, being a female. I can make something masculine, or a female, if she's an artist, she can make something masculine. The outflow of the creation simply demonstrates aspects of the traits of that creator who made it. And so it is with God, right? We see that God is able to create something more in the woman and in the mother that wasn't there with the man. Let's go to Genesis 2 and verse 18. We all know these scriptures like the back of our hands, but we're going to go and read them anyway because God makes stuff come out of the woodwork sometimes, even if we know it well. Genesis 2 and verse 18. And Yahweh God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." And just as a reminder, for those who maybe haven't heard this before, or those who are there, anytime you see Lord in all four capitals, that's the replacement for the four letters YHVH or YHWH. So there's probably different ways to say it, but we're going to go with Yahweh. And so Yahweh God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." And out of the ground, Yahweh God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was his name. And so Adam gave names to all the cattle and all the birds of the air and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper comparable to him. So God sees that of all this creation that he's already made, there is something different and unique about the man that is lacking. It's like God has taken all these traits, provider, protector, fill in the blank for whatever man is, because I'm scheduled to talk on Father's Day weekend, so I'm not going to give away what all that stuff is, or I'd be out a message probably for that weekend. So God takes all the things that constitute a man and rolls it into Adam, but he says, look, there's something missing here. And furthermore, this creation is so different from all the other animals that who will be comparable to him? Essentially, all the animals were brought before him, and God's like, no. You could name them, but they're not for you. You're not comparable to them in any way. Verse 21, and so the Lord God, Yahweh, caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which Yahweh had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." So it's interesting that Adam was formed from the dust of the earth, but not Eve. Certainly her core components come from the ground, same elements, same everything. But in this creation narrative, Eve sprung forth from man. Let's continue on. We want to look at Genesis 3 and verse 16. I want to look at a little bit, before we go too much further, I want to look at the curse, right? And so, to the woman, Genesis 3:16, of course we all know the story. They transgressed against God. Eve had brought Adam to sin. Adam had not properly exercised the spiritual leadership and had allowed them as a couple to sin and to take of the fruit that they ought not have had. And so the punishment comes. God's already cursed the serpent, and now to the woman, he said, "I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." And then, of course, Adam gets his curse. The ground becomes cursed, and in toil you should eat of it, and it will bring forth thorns and thistles. And so you should eat out of it with difficulty, basically. So it's interesting here that essentially God has partnered with the woman, in a sense. God specially designed and appointed women to do the work of propagating our species. That goes for animals, that goes for the human species as well, of course. Right? But before, it came easily. It was, I don't know what it was like for Eve prior to the curse, or whether she even had a kid prior to the curse. But the fact is that God still is in the equation despite the curse. He still has a special working and special purpose through women, through mothers, and that he accomplishes his will and his creative generation propagating humankind forth from the mother. And that's such an interesting and beautiful thing that he has chosen one of the two genders to do this through. He could have done it through both, I suppose. And now, of course, we see in modern society that we are claiming that you can't do that. Of course, it's not true. But he has chosen the woman and specially designated her and appointed her to do this work. Now, technically, men are involved too. But men are involved kind of like the chicken is involved with breakfast, right? The chicken's committed to breakfast, but the pig, or the turkey, I guess, the turkey or the cow is fully committed in terms of the bacon, right? You have to be full-on committed. So the woman lays down her life for 9 months at a time. And then the time after that, wherein she nourishes and raises the children. But through all this, she is God's partner. Psalm 71 verse 5 says this. It says, "For you are my hope, O Lord God. You are my trust from my youth. By you I have been upheld from birth. You are he who took me out of my mother's womb. My praise shall be continually of you." And then it's almost like he's continuing the thought in Psalm 139, verse 13 through 16. Psalm 139, 13. "For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written. These days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them." It's beautiful that God, though he put the curse on the woman, he still works with her in a co-mutual effort to knit every cell together through the DNA as it's been programmed, through him upholding every last thing. When a woman is pregnant, there's lots of things that can go wrong. But God is the one who upholds and knits these things together. He has a secure and sure hold, and this is a partnership he has with the woman. And it's a beautiful thing that we can see that. So in this partnership, he has set forth certain aspects and characteristics of himself. Do you remember in Luke 13, verse 34? Let's go there. Luke 13 and verse 34. Jesus is looking, and he's actually talking to the people of Jerusalem. Luke 13, 34. I don't think that's, 13, 34. Here we go. Jesus is saying and lamenting over Jerusalem. Saying, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you're the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, but you were not willing. So the same one who created the birds with their nature, the same one that created all of animal kingdom, all of the human kingdom, and put the nature into the mother to keep and to tend and to nurture. He has those same characteristics as well. He wants to gather up, just as a mother hen, the same way he designed her to do, but to gather up those who are willing to nurture, to hold, to gather them to himself. This is a motherly trait that Jesus has instilled. So the first thing that we can see mothers and see Jesus in mothers is that they are very nurturing. It's the nature of a mom in all normal circumstances and circumstances being normal to take care of the young, to nurture them, to pour into them, to have that care. You've seen it. Well, we've all kind of seen it. I think it happens especially with guys, but when you see someone else's baby, you're like, that's someone else's baby. That's a cute baby. Most times. That's a cute baby. Or that's an adorable baby. But I don't really love that baby. I think that baby's great. But we don't pour into the nurture of that baby. It doesn't come by default for someone else's kid generally. But when it's yours, and you're the mother, it's like a switch gets turned on, and you will absolutely pour into that baby almost without having to think about it. Now, there's things like postpartum, and there's stuff that would kind of rupture that norm, and there are things that can go sideways a little bit. But by and large, that is the pattern, that is the tendency that Jesus has placed, the Creator has placed in each one of us, or each woman, and to some extent the fathers as well, but to pour that nurturing into him. And so Jesus does with us. He's a good shepherd who nurtures, who pours into us. Hebrews 12 and verse 12. Hebrews 12 and verse 12. Verse 2. Therefore, we'll start at verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and had sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. One of the aspects of motherhood that moms are really good at, dads need to be good at this too, but one of the things that mothers are really good at is doing things that they might hate or loathe on behalf of their child. Jesus had this joy set before him, and it's because of that joy that he endured. And similarly, mothers, and fathers to some extent, but mothers have a joy set before them when they're giving birth, as they are investing and pouring into their children, when you're in the thick of raising 3 kids, some of which are really screamy and will keep you up at night, or 1 kid or 2 kids or however many kids. But they have to do things that they might not want to do. And that's one of the callings that God puts on their lives, and on men as well, of course. But the pouring out of yourself, the literal washing of feet. We do that at Passover for one another, but I can't help but think about that whenever we bring our little kid in from playing out in the mud and we're going to put him to bed. I have to become like a servant. Liz has to become like a servant to wash these kids' feet. Not just their feet, but all of them, right? But sometimes just their feet. But we have to do things that we may not want to do. It gets worse than washing feet. You all know that. Moms know that. It gets a whole lot worse than that. But there's things that we don't want to do. But we do it for the joy that's set before us. Mothers do it for the joy that's set before them. They're pouring into these little walking, talking investments that will grow up and become, hopefully, followers of the Most High God, productive citizens, good, caring, loving people. And so, for the time being, mothers do the things that they maybe don't want to do. It's hard, and some of the things they are not looking forward to, but they do it for the joy of what's set before them as they raise these kids. For that, we appreciate you, moms. Mothers give of their bodies and sometimes sacrifice their bodies completely to sustain life and to uphold their young. When you're pregnant, I'm told, it can be quite a ordeal. It's not just for a day or two, right? It's 9 months. You go to full term, it's 9 months. And it is not done then either. You're just kind of getting started. Because then you're giving of your body as you feed your children from your body. You are pouring out into them. You forego sleep in order to get up in the middle of the night to pour life into your children from your own body. This is the work of Jesus. This is what Jesus did for us. When he sacrificed his body that we might have life, that he gives the rivers of living water in pouring out. He gives the milk of the word. He gives the meat of the word to us. He literally sacrifices his body so that we can have life and be upheld. So is motherhood a role that reflects the work of Jesus? Is Jesus in creating mothers, the creator in creating mothers, is this an aspect of himself that he has put into the woman? Absolutely. It's not just that he is a masculine God. Of course he is. He's strong, masculine defender, provider, etc. But he also has that tender side, the nurturing side, the side that pours out of himself into his young, into his creation. John 16, Jesus actually talks about this. John 16 and verse 21. You're asking, I can't remember the context, and I don't want to read the whole chapter, but Jesus, breaking in at verse 18, he says, if the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet, because you're not of the world, I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. I'm reading in, man, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm reading in verse chapter 15. I was like, are we going to get to the point? And apparently we were not, because I'm off a chapter. I'm so sorry. John 16:21. A woman, when she is in labor, has sorrow because her hour has come. But as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish for the joy that a human being has been born into the world. Therefore now you will have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and no one will take that joy from you. Whenever Liz has had our kids, at least for, I think, kid number 1, possibly kid number 3. Kid number 2, we didn't have any time for anything. We were running a little bit behind to get to the birthing center. But she had set up before her the verse that said, for the joy set before him, he endured. And we already referenced that verse, of course, on doing the things that mothers may not look forward to or don't enjoy. But it's nowhere more applicable than on childbirth, where mothers give of their bodies and sometimes sacrifice their bodies, sometimes sacrifice their lives so that their kids can have life. Maybe I was supposed to read that because it says if we were the world, back in John 15 and verse 19. Maybe I was supposed to read that because it says if you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you're not of the world, I chose you out of the world, and so the world hates you. Remember that the world said to you as servants. Remember the word that I said to you: a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. And so we see today, we see motherhood being completely reduced to a bunch of nothing. It's being said that men can be mothers, that anyone can be a mother. And then if that's not enough, it's the whole idea of motherhood is being so diminished that now the idea that you don't have to have there's no fulfillment in having a child. In fact, having a child will take away your fulfillment, take away your enjoyment. Get rid of the child. Don't worry about that. That's what the world tells us. But God has designed something so much greater and so much more beautiful. Again, having a kid is not where a woman has to find her fulfillment. Ultimately, the fulfillment comes from the relationship with God. We should never find fulfillment in that. But it is a beautiful role that works together and dovetails beautifully with the hand of God, that they get to join together in creation of a child. And so mothers give up of their bodies, and we thank them for doing that they're willing to do that they're willing to get the scars sometimes, they're willing to give and take the pain so that the joy of another life can enter this world. That is the work of Jesus. So they bear the curse, and I like this. I saw this quote. I love this quote. I found this quote on desiringgod.com. It says, mothers embrace the curse so that we may be born, and Christ embraced the curse so that we may be reborn. Isn't that beautiful that we have these curses to have to endure? The mothers have theirs, Jesus had his, but it all results in new life. The way of the enemy results in death, but God is always looking to show and to have new life. One of the other roles that moms share with the Lord is that moms foster and raise up the next generation of believer. Yeah, dads are supposed to do that too. But the reality of it is so often that dads have to go out and provide the living, and very often, it's not everyone's situation or scenario, but so often the mothers are the ones who are at home raising the child. She spends the majority of time with the children, and we can actually back that with numbers. Barna is a study group. They recently did a study called the State of the Bible, and they found that, the report found that 77% of respondents are following their mother's faith. Those who would call themselves Christians today, or I guess it may not even be limited to Christians, but I think it was. It was limited to Christians. 77% of respondents said, "Yeah, I'm following the way I'm walking today because of my mother's faith." Conversely, 32%, that's like a third, of those who had atheistic or agnostic or no faith mothers by age 10 now identify as Christian. So you have a much higher percentage. By my count here, it looks like a 45% higher percentage, if your mom's Christian, of taking your faith. There's a large influence there that the mom puts on the formation of the child. In this study, they also said that moms, 63% of people who are Christians said moms were their foremost partners in prayer. In conversations about God, 70% said that. About the Bible, 71% said that. Or 72% had other faith questions. That was their mom. That was their foremost partner in their formation as they grew. The study describes moms essentially as managers of faith formation. This is a huge role. This is a huge role that has been given to mothers. Now, certainly fathers have a massive role to play too. We'll talk more about that on Father's Day if that's where we end up going on Father's Day. But this is such a role of responsibility and sacrifice that moms are here to do. It's their primary ministry. In fact, you might go out and say that this is the primary role that God has intended for a woman, is to bear, to raise, to impart the faith of Jesus, to impart that into them. Certainly there's other spiritual works that God expects out of mothers, but this is such a foundational, beautiful thing that God does together with the mom to raise up the next generation of kids, to raise up the next generation of Christian. And it's actually, we see this demonstrated in the scriptures as well. Do you remember in 2 Timothy, well, we can turn there, I guess, but 2 Timothy 3 and verse 14, Paul's talking to Timothy, who's basically his adopted son in the faith. And he's saying, but you, Timothy, must continue, in verse 14, you must continue in the things which you have learned and been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through Christ, which is in Christ Jesus. But you must continue in the things which you have learned, right? And been assured of knowing from whom you have learned them. Who is that? Acts 16 and verse 1 tells us that, actually. Then he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple there, named Timothy, the son of a certain Jewish woman who believed, but his father was Greek. The inference is that his father did not believe. So he learned of these things from his mother. Timothy, one of the foremost of the biblical characters. I don't know if I can call him an apostle or not. I guess he was. Yeah, apostle or disciple or whatever you would like to call him. One of the foremost. He learned all that. He was brought up essentially by his mom. C.S. Lewis has, and again, I don't mean this as a slight to anybody who doesn't have this career, because some women have careers and still maintain the job of raising their kids. That's not the point here. But C.S. Lewis actually said something I thought was of such value, and it really puts in perspective kind of what everyone else's jobs should be in terms of supporting that. C.S. Lewis said this. He said, now again, it's an opinion, but this is what he said. The homemaker has the ultimate career. All other careers exist for one purpose only, and that is to support the ultimate career. Now, how can he say something like that, right? If we consider, which we just talked about, if the mother's so foundational in the raising up of the children spiritually, how is she going to be able to do that if she doesn't have a network of a husband or a network whose job exists to support her in doing that? It's not going to be quite the same. There are those as well who maybe aren't mothers or have not been able to be mothers. Let this message not be exclusionary to you in any way. There are mothers who are not biological mothers. There are those who have that tendency to nurture, to keep, to raise up, to build up, to impart spiritual wisdom to others, and they don't have a biological child in this world. We know people like that. You all know people like that. And the thing is whether you're young, a young lady, whether you're a woman who has not been able to bear children, or whether you are a woman who has children already, those are still roles and ministries that God leaves open to you. The question is are you being called to them, and are you willing to go out and take those opportunities? To lift up those others, to nurture on others. They don't have to be your kids, to pour into and to nurture them. So we continue to see these characteristics and traits of Jesus in mothers, and so we celebrate mothers for that. Have you ever noticed that in the scripture, Jesus is, there's the first Adam, which is Adam, and there's the second Adam, who refers to Jesus. And there's this comparison and contrast of between Adam and Jesus, of where Adam failed and where Jesus succeeded in bringing salvation. Because of Adam, the fall came about. And because of Jesus, we were rescued from the curse and from the fall. You could actually make a very similar comparison between Eve and Mary, right? Because of Eve, we received the fall and the curse was placed. But then you come to Mary, and Mary, through Mary, let me go back over here to Eve. The reason this happened is because Eve rebelled. Eve rebelled against God. She wanted to do her own thing. But then you come to Mary, and the curse was able to be rolled back in great part because of her submission and obedience to the Lord. Her being willing to submit to God's calling on her life, to raise up the one who would become the one to break the curse, to break the hold of the enemy, to deliver us. It was through her obedience to the Lord, it was through her submission to the Lord and her willingness to bear that aspect of the curse so that she could bear the curse breaker. I want to point out that God has a special place in his heart for women, for mothers, for those who bear their young. In Isaiah 40, Liz was reading a devotional recently, and this is one of the pages, or one of the verses in the pages that really spoke to her. In Isaiah 40, it's talking about the Good Shepherd, and you start in verse 11. It says, "He will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs with his arm." Okay, that's what a shepherd does. A shepherd will go and take care of his flock. He'll pick them up. He'll move them about to make sure that they're taken care of. But he does something more. He says, he will gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom and gently lead those who are with young. It's sort of codified in the terms of the shepherd and lamb analogy. But God has a real soft spot here for those who are mothers. He will gently lead them who are with young. He pours out his mercy and his compassion and shepherds them well. Because after all, a mother's work is the work of Jesus as well. Jesus is using people on this earth. He's using men, he's using women, and he's using mothers to continue to build his family here on earth, that he would build out disciples, that the disciples would choose him, that they would become like him by accepting him, and that he would build out a great spiritual family at the end of the age, at his return. Mothers are crucial to this effort. The enemy, the world, will continually try to undermine this effort. The enemy always goes for women and children first. It's what bad guys do, right? They'll attack the back of the line. They'll attack the weak. They'll attack the areas unguarded. And they'll attack women and children. God has a heart for this group. God has a heart for you, ladies. God has a heart for you. He put you where you are and gave you what you have, the ability to do it. And of himself, he gave certain characteristics that he allows to be shown through you that only a mother can really show. We want to thank you for doing that. Thanks to the moms of our kids. Thanks to my own mom for all that she's done for me. Thank you to the congregation of women that we have here for all that they are doing to pour in to the kids in this congregation, that the generation may continue of the church. If it weren't for parents passing along the gospel, there would be no more church. But the church, God says that the gates of hell will not stand against his church. And so he empowers women, he empowers fathers, he empowers mothers to raise these kids. And so we appreciate mothers for all that they do. We recognize the work of Jesus in their lives, and we hope that we can see that evidenced as we go through this coming year. We're thankful to you, mothers, for all that you do, and may the Lord be with you as you continue in your work. It's such a great work. It's a work that I couldn't personally do myself. It would be awful if I tried to do that. So thank you to all the moms. Happy Mother's Day. Let's go ahead and have one more worship song, and then let's just bless one another in fellowship today as we go in to have the potluck.